Okay, what do we have here? All right, let's get started. First off, here's our agenda. We'll go through a few announcements, upcoming events, and just a quick review of our meeting format. Our feature speaker today is Fraser Gallop, the CEO of Onware Business Solutions, and they do a variety of things for a variety of companies. I'll let Fraser introduce himself and give you some more information about that. When Fraser is done speaking, we'll be taking questions from you, which we will ask that you, instead of posting them during the meeting, DM them directly to Nicole. And Nicole, you want to wave there? Everybody can see you. DM them to Nicole, and she will tee them up for us after Fraser is finished. And then following that, we will have just a real short break to let people decide if they want to hang out with us a little bit longer. And we'll go into about a 30-minute networking session. And we call this AAA, Ask Anyone Anything. It says Tableau, and that's probably a good guideline, but I don't want to limit it to that. If you have some general data visualization or maybe a security question based on the topic that we have today, feel free to ask that. And I have found that a lot of people have gotten problems they have been struggling with for months answered in this session. So if you got something on your mind, stick around, pitch it, ask for help. We got some really smart, really experienced Tableau users out there, and I bet they're going to help you. So I encourage you to stay around, but don't feel obligated if you need to do something else. So before we go further, there are a team of people that meet every other week and do all the work to find speakers, book them, book the venues when they are actually in person and when we can have a hybrid meeting, send out the notices, send out the recording links, do everything to make this TUG one of the best in the US. And I think we would put ourselves up against anyone in a competition. And I'm very proud to work with these people. They're all smart, hardworking, and dedicated, and just a pleasure to work with. So this is why I myself have been on this advisory council since early 2020. Chris also has been there that long. And we invite you to join us. If you like to do anything along the lines of marketing, event planning, social media, or just plain networking, send an email to Chris and he will be happy to tell you all about it and probably show up at your door with an application form. Not just kidding about that, but we do welcome the help and we do welcome the input of all Tableau users that join this TUG. So I encourage you to do that. So here's some announcements that we have. In March, we're going to have a hybrid meeting. We try to have a hybrid meeting roughly 4 times a year. So this will be our first quarter hybrid meeting. And that meeting will be on March 7th, which is a Thursday, as they normally are. Unfortunately, the conference room that we normally use at the Salesforce office here in Austin is booked that day. So we are looking for another venue, and we will get the word out of where that venue as soon as possible. But as it says, it's a hybrid. That means if you are generally a virtual participant or wanted to come but you can't, there's still the virtual option for you. We always have speakers lined up, usually about 6 months in advance. We do, however, have an opening for the April meeting that we're talking to several speakers about, but we have not nailed that down yet. And there will be, of course, another meeting in May. They'll be on May 9th. Tableau TC. Get ready, folks. It's coming, just like every year. This year it's in San Diego. So no craps tables for you guys, but maybe you can get out on a boat or just enjoy the beautiful weather. It'll be awesome as it always is. So mark that on your calendars. Get yourself registered. Our Slack community has been very active. We're thrilled to see people introduce themselves. We share community events and announcements, topics, and it's also another place where you can ask for help. We have a channel for that. So check out for sign up. And Nicole, do you have a link to sign up with the Slack that you could put in the chat window?
It's in chat for you all right there.
All right. Yeah. So click on that if you haven't already joined our Slack channel. Now, just before we get started with our feature presentation, a quick review of our format. We encourage you to turn on your camera, but don't feel like you have to. I know there's a lot of introverts in the data field, but you also know the customary Zoom etiquette is to keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. But feel free to make comments in the chat window. You can DM people, you can DM everybody. But if you have a question for Fraser, then please DM Nicole. And I am normally the co-host, and I didn't edit this because I didn't know Nicole was going to do this until just before we started. But today I'm not the co-host, I'm actually your host. Chris Monahan, who's usually our host, he is traveling from Florida, so he wasn't able to get home in time. And as I mentioned, we'll have the Q&A afterwards. When we send out a recording to the meeting, if you don't know that it is being recorded, it is, and we will send you a link and also a link to a survey. We want to get your feedback. How was this meeting? How was the speaker? Could we do better? Any ideas, any suggestions are all welcome. It's fair game. We won't take it personally. We promise. And with that, we thank you for your attention. And let me introduce our feature speaker, Fraser Gallop, CEO of Onware Business Solutions, who will talk to us about securing your data at the user level. Welcome, Fraser.
I'll just remember to unmute myself. Thank you very much. So I can just take it away, I guess. Let me share my screen here. Is that coming through?
Very nicely, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I will explain. I will introduce myself. So I'm Fraser. Like Homer said, my day job is Onware. I'm also a Tableau ambassador, and I spend a lot of my time kind of working with Tableau prep and kind of back-end connecting to data sources, that type of thing. My family is actually, my family is in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, but I spend about half my time here in Houston because our company has the two locations. I was mentioning I'm actually going to come to Austin on the weekend on my way to San Antonio for next week. So I'm kind of in the neighborhood. So this is actually like good timing. And I'm also the kind of co-lead of both the Edmonton and the Houston Tableau user groups. So both involved in those. And I'll come back to that later on a little bit. But yeah, I spend a lot of my time connecting to data. I unfortunately don't get to spend as much time as I would like working with Tableau and building dashboards these days. But it's okay. I don't mind writing SQL queries. So let's kind of get into it. The topic that I want to discuss today is securing data at the user level. So I wanted to kind of talk about the problem and you know why we would do this and how we can solve for it. So as an example, think about like a construction business. We do a lot of work with the construction industry, so this is like something that comes up for us quite often. You know, a construction company could have 3,000 jobs in a year that they're running. So like a very large volume of jobs, they could have 50 different project managers they're out running those jobs. But you know, they may not want every PM to see all the data for all the jobs of the company, right? They may want to say, okay, I only want the PMs to be able to access their jobs. I don't want them to be able to go look at the other PM's jobs. Why? Well, you could have confidential information. You know, when you have a construction job, you have like, you know, cost information that includes like salaries and rates for everybody that works on that job. Maybe they don't want, you know, PM1 to see PM2 salary, and if they had full access to the data, they'd be able to kind of get that information. So that there could be like lots of different types of things that, you know, you want one user to see, but you don't want other users to see. Kind of thinking that, you know, you want to use the same data source for all your users regardless. You don't want to make like, you know, we've actually seen cases where people have gone out and they've had created 50 data sources for 50 different PMs, and each one is limited to their jobs. That's not the way to solve the problem, right? You want to have one data source so you can centrally manage things, but you want to give access to just the right data. And so when you're doing that, you may ask, you know, why can't I just do a join? I can join the tables together and it'll just work. And the answer is no, you can't, because you'll have exploding row counts and you will blow up your data source. Let me do these out of order. So kind of on that idea, if you look at one job, so you have one project manager, you might have 10 accounting users that you want to access that job, and you have 5 other users. Maybe there's like an assistant on the job, maybe there's somebody in operations or an executive that also needs to have access to that job and that data. If you do your join to the access table, who has access to that job, one row becomes 16. If you then go and join in your transactions, it's not hard to get 500,000 transactions on a single construction job. You now have 8 million rows. So, you know, it's just not, that's just one job as well. So, you know, back in my example, like maybe you have, you know, a couple thousand jobs a year, that's just going to be a data source that's unmanageable. So really what we have to do is come up with like a bit better solution to be able to do that. And so the thing that we would do is extract the tables separately, and you still do a join, but you're going to do that at runtime or like render time, like in your dashboards. And so the good news is that if you want to solve this problem, Tableau has really good support for doing this. And there's actually 3 different ways that we can accomplish this. So in the presentation, I'm going to switch into demo mode here, and I'm going to show you 3 different ways that you can solve this problem. So the first way is I'd say it's more like prototype. So it's a way to get started. It lets you, you know, accomplish the task, but I'd say it's maybe not a production solution. The second way is a better solution. It lets you do the same thing, but then we'll get to the third solution, which is virtual connections, and that's kind of like the best in class. That's the best way to do this. But there are some kind of gotchas that kind of go along with that. So what we'll do is we'll look at the first one, which is user filters. User filters, we're going to switch, and I'm actually just going to walk through and show you how to set this up. So I've got Tableau desktop standing by here. What I can do is I can connect to my data. So I'm actually going to connect directly up to my SQL server here. Just give me a minute. Grab the password. I may be living dangerously doing all of this live on a call, but we'll see. So I've connected to my SQL server here, and I'm interested in it's not a huge database. I'm just using a small database for illustration purposes. But I've got a table in here. It's called extract refreshes task. I'm just going to bring this in. All of this data that I'm working with in this database is actually stuff that we've pulled down off the Tableau API. It was just something handy that I had that I can work with. But I've got my extract refreshes task table here and connected to it. So I'm just going to head on over to my first sheet here. And I'm just going to show you some of the data. So I've got 3 Tableau sites that I have data for in this data set. Those are the site IDs, the internal IDs. And you can see for each of those sites, I've got a different row count. So this is just like, site 1, 51 rows, site 2, 40 rows, site 3, 40 rows. And what I can do is I can create a user filter. It's actually very easy to do this. You can just go up to server, and there's an option right in the menu here that says create user filter. And the way that this works is what it wants me to do is select the field that I want to filter on. So in this case, I'm going to choose my site ID as my filter. And you can see it actually pops up here. And it's showing me all of the groups and the users off my Tableau server. So I could pick a group, or I could pick an individual here and specify what access they have. And these are the 3 values I have for my site ID up in the corner here. So the way I'm going to actually do this is I'm going to say that employees have access to these 2 sites, and then people in the vendor group have access to the 3rd site. So that's all you have to do to set that up. And then it just creates a user filter inside of your measures here. So now to apply this user filter to my workbook, I can just drag that into the filter pane, and you'll see it actually automatically puts it into the context. So you see it came in here as a gray pill, not a blue pill. If you're not familiar, the gray pills, you can accomplish this if you just normally you see a blue pill. If you want to see a gray pill, you go add to context. And what that means is that it computes that filter first. So normally if you have like 3 or 4 blue pills doing filtering on a view, they kind of get calculated at the same time. And if you make it a gray pill, it gets calculated before the other blue pills. So it's just basically this one comes first. It applies to all the other filters because it's gray. So now you can see it's actually changed my data when I applied that filter, because my user is actually in the employee group. So it's already filtered out some of my data. So it's down to just showing me 2 sites rather than 3 sites. If I go and I switch to another user, there's actually a very handy thing down here that you may have noticed or not noticed when you use Tableau. It's a filter as user. So this is always kind of in there, and you can switch to other users on your Tableau server. So I can say, show me what George would see. And so if I click on George, it'll just take a second here to do the query again, but it's going to show me what George would see if he went and looked at this view. So I can see that he sees just the 3rd site, and he doesn't see the other 2 sites. If I go and switch to yet another user on here, I'm going to go to Elaine, because she's in the employee group. Then we will see what she has access to, and she'll should have the same access as me. So we'll see the 2 sites listed there. So that works really well. You can see that just took a couple clicks to actually implement that one, and then I can go and I can publish this workbook to my Tableau site. So I'm just going to put it in here. Call it book 4. Sounds good. This is actually a new feature to row level security that just appeared when I was working on this presentation. I'm like, I haven't seen that before. There's this little drop down here, generate thumbnails as user. The old behavior was that the thumbnails for workbooks that had row level security enabled on them just showed like a little picture of a user. It didn't actually show a thumbnail of the workbook. But now that you've got a feature where you can actually say, show the thumbnails as like those guys would see it. It's actually, when we've implemented this with customers, they've actually like kind of complained and said, like, I don't have the thumbnails on those workbooks. Why don't I have the thumbnails? I can't figure out which dashboard to click on. But they've obviously fixed that fairly recently in Tableau Cloud. So this is published to the server now. This is great. When I open it up, I'm just going to see the data filtered. Oops, sorry, I didn't embed my SQL Server password. Give me 1 second here. Do that. I see the data and it's just filtered to me. So that's just Fraser's data. That's great. So this works. I accomplished the task. I filtered the data to the user level, and it was really easy and quick to implement. But there's a couple of problems with this approach. So problem number one is that when I created this created a set. So I took the values that were here and I mapped them to the groups that have access to them. And that works if you have if I only have 3 sites here, it's not a big deal. But if I add a 4th site, obviously Tableau doesn't know what to do with that 4th site. So nobody's going to have access to that 4th site until I come and edit this workbook and I update my set to add that 4th site in there. So that's a bit of a problem because as your data is changing, every time you'd have to come back and you'd have to update this workbook, update the set. If you had, 2 workbooks that were using the data source, it's in the workbook level, it's not at your data source level. So you'd have to go and apply this to every workbook. Like I said, it's a prototype kind of solution. It's good if you just need to do a quick and dirty user filter on some data, but it's not really a great production type solution. The other thing that the drawback to this approach is that I've published this now to Tableau Online, and I'm a creator, I'm a site administrator, so I get the edit button here. So if any user that has that ability, they'll be able to hit the edit button and they can just pull that off, and then they can see all the data again. So it's a solution. It's a neat solution. It's quick, but it has limited use. So if we go back to my little slides here, so just to kind of recap, the first one, user filters, fast and easy to implement. You don't need any tables that talk about your users, and it's entirely at the workbook level. So it's fast and easy to implement. Disadvantages: it's not centrally controlled. Your IT department won't like it. Breaks easily with changing data, and the Explorer and Creator users can circumvent. So that's kind of the first way we can approach and we can get a result, but it's not necessarily the best result. So we'll move on to a second idea here. So the second idea is that we can use user filters, but instead of using the set-based approach that comes with Tableau Desktop, we're going to create an entitlement table. So let's switch over here, and I'm going to show you my entitlement table. My entitlement table is very simple. This is on my SQL Server. I just created this in a few minutes, but I said, these are the users. So I put in my users and I put which sites they have access to. So Elaine has access to these 3 sites. Fraser has access to 1 site. Thomas has access to 1 site. Now, this is one that I just created by hand. But what we find is that lots of times, if you're pulling data from the system, it may have user information already in a table, and you can bring that information into Tableau. We've also done things where we kind of make a hybrid approach, and we say, thinking of the construction job, the person that's tagged as the project manager on the job gets access to the job, but anybody that's in the accounting security group can also have access to the job. So we can make a fancier SQL query that gives us that information and can send it back to Tableau. In the case of my example here, I just did something really straightforward. So we're going to go back into Tableau now, and I'm going to just make a new workbook here. And connect to data. We'll do the same thing we did last time. We're going to connect the SQL Server. Okay, and so now I'm going to pull the same table in that I pulled last time, which is the extract refreshes task. And I'm going to also bring in my entitlements table. And so we just have to say, you know, how these match up. Tableau actually figured it out already. Site ID equals site ID. We're happy. We don't have to do anything fancy on the relationship. You can do this in two ways. You can do it with a noodle. You can also do it with a join. If you were going to do this with a join, it's a little bit different. So I would bring in the first table, and then I can join on my entitlements table. Just figured it out. The one thing that you would have to remember if you're doing an extract to do this, you always want to make sure that you turn on logical tables. So this setting basically says that it's one table for each logical table. It's downloading the table separately. If you choose, or sorry, backwards. If you choose physical tables, it'll download the tables separately. So you can see it improves performance and reduces the size of your extract. If you do logical tables, it's going to do the join first, and it's going to just make a big table and download that. So if you do like a traditional kind of join in your data source, you just have to make sure you have the extract set properly. But I'm just going to stick with the noodles. So I'll bring that one, and then I will bring in my entitlements table. And the default behavior with the noodles is that it does do logical tables, and you'll see you can't actually choose that physical tables option. So it basically downloads two tables and keeps them separate. I'm going to stick with the live connection on this one. So I'll just switch over to my sheet. And we'll do the same thing we did last time. So I'll just bring in my sites. You can see I have my 3 sites here. I'm going to do a row count. So same data as before, but now we've got this entitlements table. So I'm just going to create a calculated field. And so the way that we can accomplish this is we can create a calculated field or user filter. And there's actually a little function in here that's very handy for this purpose. It's called username. So I can just do username, and what this is going to do is it's going to return the username for the current user. So in my case, my username is fraser.gallop@onware.com. That's what this function will return. So I'm just going to say username equals email, which is the email address on my entitlements table. And that's basically, if it's true, then you have access to the data. If it's false, you don't have access to the data. You can be a little bit fancier. One of the things that we often will do when we're setting these up is we'll say username equals email, or you can say username equals. Basically, this is an override, and it's saying that I have access to everything, right? So it's either a matching email, which is for most of the users, but you could put like your administrators or like your site admins in here so that they can see everything and not have to turn the filter off and on constantly to be able to look at all data versus filtered data. So lots of times we'll set it up like that in our calculated field, but it works very similar. You just drag it in here. And so we'll say true. And then I'll do the same thing. I'll add it to the context just so it gets calculated first. And because we put the exception in this time, I can actually still see all the data. After I've applied my filter, I still see everything. But if we go and switch users, we'll kind of get the same behavior. So we'll pick Elaine. And if you remember from my entitlement table, she should have access to 2 sites. Let that go. Oh, and I messed up. How did I mess up? Or did I give her access to all? So this is where it becomes handy to check your entitlements table. Yes, I did give her all 3, and she still has access to all 3. Okay. So now I will switch to Thomas, and we know that he just has 1. So there we go. And now we see Thomas just has access to his one. And back when it was, my user, we saw that actually in the entitlements table, I just have access to one site as it's set up right now. But when we switch back to my user, I have access to all 3 sites because I put that exception into the filter. And so this is really great as a solution now, because we were working with an entitlements table. It could be a query that comes from like a source system. When people get added, when people get removed, I don't have to do anything in my Tableau workbook. It's just all driven by that entitlements table. So it's a lot more robust solution, because then as your data is changing, your filter doesn't have to change. And you can also deploy this filter, to multiple workbooks using the data source, and it's going to work the same way in those cases. Same thing happens here when you publish it to the Tableau server. I'm going to say embed the password this time, and write the thumbnails. I'll do those online and just publish this. And when we bring it up, same thing. We know that my user now has access to all 3 because I put the exception in the rule. But we also have the same challenge as we did in the first example. Any user that has access to like a creator license, they have access, or explorer license, they have access to make changes to this dashboard, they can simply click edit and they can override my filter. So it's kind of got the same problem. We solved the problem about changing data and managing the access to the data, but we haven't kind of solved the problem of like untrusted creators or explorers. So if we go back, the advantage of that one, again, it's still easy to implement. It's not really hard to implement that. The advantage really though is that works with any Tableau compatible data source. So whether it's like an old school ODBC, it's Excel, it's a Tableau extract, anything kind of works with this method. So it's really the most flexible. In terms of disadvantages, potentially you need a way to create and maintain the entitlement table. It depends where that data is coming from, that in your situation. But as long as you have that table and you can manage that table, then you're happy with that. So that's a good solution. We use this in production with customers that typically our customers, like their explorers and their creators are more trusted. So it's okay for us to use the solution because they most of the users are just going to be viewers. They don't have access to make changes to workbooks anyway. So it's a good solution for that. It is something that we've deployed into production. You can use in production just fine. The third thing that we can look at though is the idea of the virtual connection. And so I said this is like the best solution. This is a really nice solution. Before I get really deep into this, I'll just mention it requires the data management add-on, and I'll come back to this a little bit. So it's not all Tableau deployments out of the box will have support for virtual connections. You have to have that turned on. So that's a potential issue. And for this one, we actually start with Tableau Online. So we start with Tableau Online when we want to create a virtual connection. We don't start with Tableau Desktop. And just up in the top right corner, you'll see a new button and a selection there for a virtual connection. So I'm just going to click on that. And so we get a connect to data window. This is something that's very similar to the one that we find in Tableau Prep, actually, for connecting to data. And you'll see that there are a whole bunch of data sources in here. When this first launched, there was only a few data sources, and they've like expanded this list over time. One of the things I'll mention it does not have in here is ODBC, and we tend to do a bunch of, sadly, we tend to do a bunch of work with ODBC. So if you have like these obscure databases or data sources, they may not work with virtual connections. But we do have all like the heavy hitters and important things like are already in here. So I'm just gonna do my connection to the same SQL server that we saw before. That database. connect up to that. And so now we've connected. It's actually asking me which tables I want to bring into my virtual connection. So this one, the setup and configuration is slightly more complicated, but the idea is that you can bring in the tables that you want to make available on your virtual connection. So I can actually bring in a whole pile of tables from my database and make them a part of this virtual connection. One of the really interesting things that this does, and in terms of like opening up possibilities, is you can have your SQL Server username and password be part of your virtual connection. So if you have, those less trusted viewer or less trusted explorer and creator users, you may not want to give them access to your database, but you may want to give them access to your tables. This lets you do that. So I can actually pick which tables I want to give to them, and have that be limited and not give them full database access. So I've brought in the 3 tables that I'm interested in using. And I'm actually going to just go over to the data policies tab now and start setting up my policies. So I'm going to take my entitlements table and, oops, sorry. First I have to create new, no. Give me a second here. My tables, I'm going to create a policy. Add table, oh, okay, sorry. So after you create your policy, you want to add tables and columns to map in your policy. So now I drag it over, and when you see I drag entitlements in here, it's actually asking, do I want to add this as a policy table or an entitlement table? I named entitlement table, so it's an entitlement table. And then the other ones I'm going to apply the policy to, so I'll drag them on to add as policy table. I'll drag those 2 in there, and you'll see it's actually asking me to map the columns. So it needs to know how it's going to match those 2 tables up. And it's on site ID. So I'll just do that mapping. Same thing here. In this case, it's called ID. It's called site ID. So I've done my mapping there. And then the second step here is to write a policy condition. And funny enough, the policy condition here is exactly the same as my calculated field I just did in Tableau. So you would do username, bring in the username, and it equals to the email in my entitlement table. You can say, good, calculation is valid. And that's pretty much it for setting that up. So if I go back to my policy, I can actually fill this out a little bit more, or put in a description, user access limited by entitlement table. And then if I go back to the first tab where you look at your tables, you can actually see that these tables are in my virtual connection, and they've got a policy applied to them now. You can do neat things like you can rename tables, you can rename inside of your virtual connection. You can also make tables not visible. So in this case, I don't actually want to make my entitlements table visible to the creators and the explorers that are going to be using this. I can turn off that visibility. And then down below here, we get a view that's actually very similar to Tableau Prep. So I can see previews of my data, and you can do a preview of your policies as well, right from the browser here. So if I bring this up, so I just check, with policy applied, and then we can pick which user we want to preview this as. So if I go and say, show me this like Elaine, we know that she has access to all 3 of these sites. So we see all 3 there. If we click on Thomas, we should only see 1 site, and he has only access to the 1 site. And then that's actually been applied to both of these tables now. So I can switch over to the other table with all the extra tasks on it, and you'll see he's just getting 51 out of 131 rows. So he's not seeing all the rows that are in there. Even with me, I'm still like a system admin user, but if I switch to preview as myself, I need to put a little gotcha to give me access to everything. When I click on this, I'm only going to see 40 rows. So that all looks good to me now. I've set up my policies, I've set up my tables, and I'm going to publish my virtual connection. So I'm going to just go put that into here. I'll just call this tug so I can find it easily. And so now I've published my my row level security virtual connection, and you know, you can see it inside of Tableau Cloud. That's nice, but I'm really interested in doing this in Tableau Desktop, so I'm going to just open up a new workbook. We'll connect to data. So this time I'm going to connect to Tableau server, and we'll put in. There's my virtual connection. So when I connect to my virtual connection now, you'll see that I get all of the tables that I put into the virtual connection are now available on my data source. And I can actually build this up, you know, just like you'd expect. I can actually take now, I can bring in more than one table. You can match site ID site. I'll be a little bit fancier on this one. And if I head over here now, I can actually bring in you know, site ID. This is what I did last time. And row count. But you see in this case, you know, I'm only seeing one site. I'm only seeing 40 rows. I'm not seeing the other two sites. I'm not seeing anything else. It's limited me. And if I go, I still have this filter as user thing down here. But if I go and I select like Elaine, because I know she has access to all the sites, you'll see that it actually doesn't make any difference. So because when you use a virtual connection, everything is done on the server side, and it's limited to my user. So like this user switcher doesn't really work. It doesn't apply. You know, there's really no way that I can go and circumvent the policy from Tableau Desktop or from editing a workbook in the browser. I see my 40 rows, that's it. I'd have to go and see what another user sees. I'd have to log into that as that other user, or you can use your virtual connection and edit your virtual connection and just say, show me as the other user. But that's the only way to kind of like subvert the policy and see what other users would see. But it's a really great solution, I think, because it's, you know, it's the most secure, and it's all kind of handled on the server side. So there's a couple nice benefits to having that. So if I go back, you know, virtual connections, so big, huge advantage. Explorers and creators still have the row level security applied to them. There's no way that they can circumvent that. So if you have like a larger deployment, people only are allowed to see what they're allowed to see. The other advantage of using the virtual connection is that, you know, you can give them the raw database tables if you want. You can give them access to more tables, but you still control all that. And you don't have to give them a database credential. So they're able to use their Tableau credentials to access the virtual connection and the database. Some of the disadvantages with this solution, like I said, not all data sources are supported. It is a smaller list than what Tableau Connect can support. It doesn't work with extracts. Virtual connection is a live connection. So if you, for some reason, needed to like use extracted data, that's not something that's supported by virtual connections today. I have my fingers crossed. I hope that Tableau at some point will actually support published extracts as an input to virtual connections. They do this in Tableau Prep and allow that. So hopefully it's coming at some point, that virtual connections, that would make my life easier. The third kind of disadvantage is that there is an extra cost for the data management add-on. So it's not, if you don't currently have it, it's not something that you know, it's free out of the box kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to cover. Which should I use? It depends. right? It's going to depend on like, what's your mix of users, what they need to have access to, what their capabilities in Tableau are. Not all three solutions will fit, every location. It also depends on your data sources. What are you actually connecting to, and will it work with a virtual connection versus user filters and entitlement tables, which kind of works with everything, like I said. So, there's three kind of options there. I think they're all really good because Tableau lets you choose, and there's you're not forced into like a single way of doing things. That's the great thing about Tableau, is that it does give you a lot of flexibility when it comes to this type of thing. And it's still like, I'm not going to say like, implementing row level security, if you're doing it properly, you're not going to like lose performance. You're not going to be like, butting your head up against the wall because your row counts have like exploded to accomplish this. So it's quite nice. And then maybe before I take questions, I'll just do a little plug for Houston Tableau user group. So next meeting is in March, on March 4th. So feel free to attend. We're going to do in person here in Houston, as well as a virtual component. Actually, both of our speakers are going to, no, one speaker will be here in Houston, and another speaker will be virtual. So you are all welcome to attend and check out that user group as well. But that was it for presentation. Do we have questions that need to be answered?
We have a lot of questions this time around. This is awesome. All right. So going back to the first example you showed, Rafik asked, do we add security in each worksheet if it is visible at the worksheet level and not the dashboard level? So
it would be the same as any other filters. So like you can click on that pill and you can say, apply to all worksheets using this data source, and then it would just go onto all worksheets. So when you're using the user filter method, that was the first and the second one, you can just add it to the first view and then just say apply to all, and then it's going to like propagate to all your views and all your dashboards.
All right, yeah, and Rafik says you actually did answer that. So okay. I hope I say this correctly. Beckor asks, or says, I'd be interested in any tips Fraser can share about management of the entitlement table. At the end of the day, we're still talking about a table that requires manual edits and updates. How do we get from there to solutions that are scalable and manageable for larger audience, 1,000 plus, potentially with different levels of access?
Yeah, so wherever possible, I'd say if your data source has that kind of information, try to leverage it. So like for my construction example with the project managers, in the project definition table, they had a field where they actually specified who the project manager was. So each one, you could find out who the PM was on that one. And then they had a security table for the actual application that we could access. And so the security table, we could go and find out like, who's in the accounting group, who's in the, C-suite group, and we can get back those users. So we wrote a query that actually went and, queried those tables and put them all together into our entitlements table. So it was actually like we created a view on the SQL server, and that became our entitlement table. So it was completely managed by their application, and Tableau just read that information. In other cases, we have done like I showed here, where we created a SQL table. That's not ideal. If you have a smaller number, you can use a SQL table to do it. You could even have it driven off in Excel if you really wanted, right? As long as you have the required information, what their username is on the Tableau server and the IDs of the records or the data that they have access to, that could be your entitlement table.
I see you nodding, Becker. Does that answer your... Yeah, cool.
I don't know if to unmute or not, but yes, that was great. Thank you for that.
Yes, please feel free. We can talk together. Okay. Rafiq asks, is the data management app part of Tableau or third party?
It's part of Tableau. I'm sorry, I'll share my screen again here. Data management is, like I said, it's an add-on, and it actually there's kind of three things that would be a really great reason for getting data management. One of them is virtual connections. So like everything I showed, that's part of data management. The other one is Tableau Prep. So you get Tableau Prep, the desktop tool, as part of your license. And you can use it to prep your data. But then if you want to publish your Tableau Prep flow to the server and run them on schedules, you have to have data management. So people, might use prep and create these really neat flows, but then if you want to have it run every night, get new data, do the prep flow, publish that data, that requires the data management add-on as well. So that's the second one. The third one is something for us site admins that is really, really kind of neat. And I don't know if I have a great example on here. Give me a second. We'll use one. I don't know if this is actually in use. Okay, so this is I've got a data source on the server here. It's an extract. What data management gives you is this additional tab here called lineage. And if you go to lineage, it's just super nice because it shows me like this is a custom SQL query, and I can say show me the query, and I can copy the query, and I didn't have to go and open my data source, connect to the server to get my query back. It took me like 2 clicks to get that, which is really very handy. The other thing that it does is it shows you all of the fields that are in your data source, and it tells you how many sheets they're in use on. So if you're trying to like do refactoring and say like I need to like change this column, I can actually click on the column and it's going to go and tell me which workbooks that's in use on. So I know exactly what I need to refactor and go and look at to make sure I don't break it. Likewise, this column are not even in use. So I could actually go and remove those from my data source, and it's not going to impact any workbooks. So the lineage tab is actually like a super useful administrator tool that's also part of data management. So 3 reasons that you might want to put that into your Tableau cloud deployment.
I use that custom SQL query button all the time. All the time. Yeah. I'm like, wait, where's this coming from? All right. So 2 things about virtual connections. First of all, I don't know if you were watching the chat, but Priyanka says that virtual connections do work with extracts. And then Becker asks for some clarification, which is maybe where this comes from. So regarding data extracts not working with virtual connections, does Fraser mean you can't use an extract as the data source for a virtual connection, or that you can't create a data source extract from a connection to a table that comes from a virtual connection? If you'd like me to put that in chat for you, I will.
Maybe the best
I can unmute and clarify.
Okay, yeah, because like yeah, maybe
so
unless
I guess the question to me is, can you create, if I'm in a workbook and I have a virtual connection, can I pull a table from there and create an extract in my workbook?
Oh, yes, for sure. So back on this example here, where this is the one where I connected to my virtual connection. So this is the virtual connection here. I can create an extract here, but this is an extract of the data that I have access to, right? So it's going to be the tables extracted with those filters. What I meant, like the input to the virtual connection cannot be an extract. So what I would like to see Tableau Server as an option here to take the data that's already been published from my legacy ODBC system into my Tableau Server, because I can do that today. So I would like to see Tableau Server as an option there. But yes, you can create an extract. It'll contain user filter data, and it can be published back to the extracted data can be published back to your Tableau server.
So follow-up question there. If you do create that as a top level user or an all access user, if I create an extract using a virtual connection that has user filters in there or policies, and then I publish that, will those user filters still apply? So if a user was
you lose
access?
you lose the policies.
Oh, okay, you lose the policies.
Yeah. So by doing an extract and then publishing that back to the server, you would lose the policies. So really, like, this is an extract now that contains 40 rows. It's just like any other extract that contains 40 rows. When I publish it to the server, it's those 40 rows without anything. Like it's basically removing the policies. It's more if I had to, like, I think the reason they support extracts this way is maybe if I needed to take that data into Tableau desktop, go offline and do some work with it, then you have an extract so you can do that. And then also, if I was building a major dashboard, I this might be a little bit faster way rather than like querying the data all the time and then switch it back to live once you're ready to publish.
There was one more in chat, and I just wanted to check. Norbert, did Becker's answer your question, or did you want to?
It gives me hope because we have like somewhere around 2,500 users. 90% are viewers, but I would like to leverage the Active Directory user groups and give permissions to those groups, and so when they get added to those groups, they automatically inherit all the that's the best way to manage it for us with a large set, right?
And that's, I would love that too. If it was out of the box. That was one of the things about going from Tableau on premises to Tableau in the cloud, is that you lose the ability to use your Active Directory groups with your users. Lots of people have been using like the Tableau API, like the REST API, to kind of manage that. So you could, Microsoft, their API is called Microsoft Graph. So you could go to Microsoft Graph, you could download that user group configuration information into like a table if you wanted, or you could get really sophisticated and you could get the information from Microsoft Graph via API and then apply that same information into Tableau via API. So people have set up like automations where you add a user to your Microsoft Active Directory in these groups, and then it will create a user on the Tableau server based on that and give the appropriate access. So there are ways, but unfortunately, it's a coding type solution. There's no like out of the box point and click type thing.
Any hope that it will ever be there?
I'm not one to say. Yeah, but it's it's just we see like almost everybody that we work with are using Active Directory or some kind of SAML login now, especially when Tableau changed so that you had to have Tableau MFA. We saw and we recommended everybody kind of just now's the time, switch to use your Active Directory login for Tableau or whatever system you're using, just to make it easier for users, right?
Okay, thank you.
All right.
And I think you kind of answered this, but you specifically answered it related to Active Directory. So Priyanka's asking, could we automate adding new users to Tableau?
Yes, yeah, totally. Like but it's using the API. So that I saw that Amy put the link to the Tableau REST API in the chat. That's raw information on the API. There's also libraries that people have released. We actually built a library for Microsoft.NET and put it on GitHub and NuGet that implements some of the API functionality, like adding users. So there are like tools out there that help you kind of do that, so you don't have to necessarily start from scratch.
Awesome. Those are all the questions we got, unless anybody wants to unmute and ask something.
I did have one, and perhaps it was answered, but can you talk to a little bit about the schema for permissions of those administrators of the users? How does it work in terms of inheritance and things like that? Is that something you control within Tableau, or is it tricky?
Like in terms of like having users be able to see everything, or
Well, like, could you have like a master administrator and then he gives or she gives certain permissions to do certain things to sub administrators, but not everything the master
oh
administrator does, things like that.
yeah, it's actually very similar to like the rest of Tableau Cloud when you're working with like the virtual connections. So you can you get I'll bring it up on the screen here again. So you can when you have your virtual connections, they get published, um, just like workbooks, data sources, all the other content on your Tableau server, and you can have it, like when I publish it, I put it into like I put it into a folder called row level security. And so you can control it at the folder level. They'll inherit the permissions from the top level folder, but you can also, just like everything else, you can be like who's allowed to
Customize it.
connect.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can customize it. Who's allowed to edit it?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Yeah. So it is very similar to the rest of the. So kind of once we've passed that hurdle of we've stored our database credentials and connection information in the virtual connection, then you can like control who has access to the virtual connection on the Tableau server, just the same as all the other content.
Yeah. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, let's all give Fraser a warm hand of appreciation and respect. This
Thank
was
you.
an excellent presentation. I think that there was a tremendous amount of information that was given. And we really appreciate all your questions. It's probably more questions than we've had in a long time. And we love to see that because it tells us you were actually paying attention. And that's always good.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Fraser.
I just have one quick question. So I see we have data lineage on our server. Does that mean I'm entitled to use prep?
Yes. If you have a creator license, you're allowed to use
Yes,
prep.
I have a
But then
creator license. Yeah.
Yeah, and then if you're seeing that lineage tab, you probably have data management, so you can publish those prep flows and schedule them all night
Probably.
long.
Probably.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
probably? If I see it,
I don't, unless Salesforce created some new some new way of selling Tableau that I haven't heard about yet.
Okay.
You should be okay. Yeah. The one thing when if you're scheduling prep flows and you haven't done it before, it only lets you have one flow running at a time. I think maybe you can get more resource blocks and have multiple, but the default is that it's like one active flow at a time. So if you're running a flow, you can't kick off. You can't have like 10 kick off at the same time.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, nobody's kicking
Okay.
off anything right now because we didn't know we had the license to use prep. So.
You know what they've been doing is like the Salesforce / Tableau account execs are kind of sneaking it in. Like, oh, you should have data management. So when they sell it to you, they're like, oh, you should just have this, and they're putting it in on lots of deals. So that's it ups the cost, but it's also really nice because you have those functionalities.
I use it all the time. I use it all the
Yeah.
time. We're trying to find out, what's being used, where it's being used, how many people are you using it down to a field level. It's very valuable.
Mm. So kind of like enterprise in-app purchases from the Tableau store.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you again so much, Fraser, for joining us and for sharing so much information.
I was going to comment. You said Tableau conference is open for registration. I'm super looking forward. I registered. I think this year was the second day registration was open. this is going to be my 10th Tableau conference. So
Awesome.
I might have to take a break after this year because it's been a long, but I'm super looking forward to the Tableau conference. I'm super looking forward to not being in Vegas for a change. So I remember very fondly the Tableau conference in Austin. Like that was actually, I think that was one of the best ones. People complained and they said, "Oh, I have to get from this place to this place." It was really cool to be in Austin for Tableau conference that year. And I said like that's when I had like my first real Texas barbecue. And after that, I've like always pursued like the memory of the best like Austin barbecue at Tableau conference. I've never quite got to that same, you know, the ideal in my memory, but it came from Tableau conference that year.
Well, you heard it here, folks, that Austin is the place to have TC. So if you get a chance to vote for where the next
Yeah.
conference will be, you know how to vote. And you get that legendary Texas barbecue. That's not to be missed. Um, all right, awesome. So thank you again, Fraser. We are going to now move into our networking session that we fondly call AAA. It stands for Ask Anyone Anything, not just me, but anyone. If you have a question or you just want to pose a philosophical question for discussion, I encourage you to do that. But before we do that, I want to highlight someone who's on this call that you want to know, and his name is Dan Bullenson. Dan is going to be our featured speaker in March. And that meeting, as I mentioned, is going to be a hybrid. It will have both the virtual and an in-person component. The only thing we don't know is where it's going to be. That is going to be a surprise because I don't know where it is either. Um, so as soon as we figure that out, we'll get the word out to you. But I want to just give Dan the floor for a minute or so to tell you all something about himself and what he's going to talk about in March, because I think you're going to find it's very, very interesting. Dan?
Thanks, Homer. Nice to meet everybody. My name is Dan Bullenson. I am a data dev ambassador and spend a lot of time thinking about Tableau extensions. So Tableau extensions, I think, are something that a lot of people are using and a lot of people aren't. We've been working with them for the last several years, and they've really changed the way we think about dashboards and changed the way some of our clients think about dashboards. That we use them in a lot of like anytime that people need to take action from a dashboard, we're trying to build in extensions to allow them to do so. And really, that's been pretty cool for what we've been able to have our dashboards do. So I'm excited to talk to you guys about that. We build extensions entirely in Python, which for us has really worked out because our team is a team really of data scientists and data analysts, and web development is not our core competency. So I'll be really excited to talk to you about that. I'm hoping to do it in Austin, so I will be first in line for some of that Austin barbecue. I've never been to the city. Really excited for it. And so, yeah, appreciate that very much. Thank you, Homer. And I'll look forward to seeing some of you in person then, and hopefully everybody at least on Zoom.
Okay, awesome, Dan. We are looking forward. That is going to be on March 7th. The Zoom link has already been sent out. The registration email is available for you to sign up. The actual location of the in-person gathering will be revealed later, and it's always followed, and we will not break this streak by a in-person networking session with adult beverages and other libations, so which are not borne with cost to you, but to our wonderful sponsor of this tug, Zeo Matrix. So for our networking session, what do you have to do? Pretty much nothing. Don't touch that end button, and you're in the networking session. Of course, if you can't stick around, then you can push the button. I won't take it personally for very long anyway. So we'll give everybody just like a minute to make that decision. And also, if you want to stick around, this is a good time to go get that drink of water or whatever it is you like to keep in your cup. And we'll come back here in like 1 minute and we'll kick off our networking.